What does community property mean? Hi everyone, I'm Chelsea Robinson from the Robinson Home Group with Rodeo Realty, bringing you another segment of Getting Real in the SFV. If this is the first time you've watched one of our videos with this channel and you will learn everything about home ownership in Los Angeles Metro, specifically about San Fernando Valley, then start right now by clicking on the subscribe button, tap on that little bell, and then you'll be notified of all new content. We are getting so many new calls, texts, and emails each and every day, and we absolutely love it. If you are thinking about moving or relocating anywhere here in the San Fernando Valley or Los Angeles areas, please be sure to shoot us a call, give us a text, send us an email, or even some old-fashioned snail mail. All of our contact information is below in the comments. However you can get a hold of us, we are happy to help and answer questions and get the process moving forward for you. Also, don't forget to check out ChelseaRobinsonRealEstate.com, which is updated in real time with all the listings hitting the Los Angeles area. Alright, so we wanted to do this video because one of the questions we get all the time from buyers is, how should I hold my title? There are all different ways, from community property to joint tenancy and even tenancy in common. We are going to jump in and explain all of this for you. And don't forget, stay tuned to the very end and find out how you can get your own free PDF guide on holding title in California. All right, let's jump in. Hi everybody, it is Chelsea Robinson. I am being joined here today by Blake Shento from Progressive Title. He is going to help us explain all the goods, ins and outs of how to hold title. So Blake, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you, Chelsea.
Awesome. So glad to hear that. So being a title expert, I'm sure you can probably fill in people here in California. Now, we are going to be talking about California specific because this can vary by state. But I'm sure a pretty common question that I get every single time from my clients is like, who is the title rep and what's the best way that I can hold my title? And inevitably, even with like spreadsheets and so forth, I still get this question. So I want to make sure that we address it and can help answer anybody's questions. So why don't we start with just like a very brief like description of kind of what title is and what are the various ways to hold it?
So great questions. So title in general, you own real property here in California, whether it's a home, condo, vacant land, commercial property, whatever it might be. There's various ways of holding that title, and depending on how you hold title, you can have different tax consequences, different consequences should someone pass away. Very important on how you hold title, and so there's very a variety of different options, and depending on how you hold it, like I said, it can have big consequences should something happen. So it's definitely important to make sure that you are always looking at how you hold title when you're buying a property, or down the road should you get married, divorced, have kids, etc. There's many options, and it's important to consult either a tax expert, CPA, attorney, to make sure you know how you are holding title and make sure that it fits your best needs.
Okay. All right. So I believe there are various different ways to hold title here in California. Can you please, like, maybe let's go through some of the most common ones?
Yeah. So, you know, if you're just an individual person, typically you're going to hold title by yourself. So for instance, Jane Smith, a single woman, or John Doe, a single man. But if you're holding title with more than one person, there are, as Chelsea mentioned, multiple options. So there's community property with right of survivorship, joint tenants, tenants in common, partnership, a trust. Those are some of the more common ways to holding title. And so again, depending on the number of people you have on title, depending on the relationship you have to this other person you're going to be on title with, these are important decisions to make in terms of how you're going to hold title. And as you mentioned, it's a question you're going to get whenever you're in escrow to purchase a property. And you have to decide then, because on your grant deed, when you buy that property, you have to hold title in one of these different ways here in California. The good news is you can always change that down the road. So should you, like I said, get married, get divorced, have children, things change, constant, you can always change the way title's held.
Okay, so why don't we discuss, because the first question I always get is community property versus community property rights with survivorship. So what are the two differences of those two?
So great question as well. So community property and community property right of survivorship, very similar. First off, community property and community property right of survivorship is limited to spouses or domestic partners. So you have to be married or registered domestic partner. And the main difference between the two is upon somebody's death, upon one of the two parties' death. So you and your spouse are on title and the spouse passes away, who does title then go to? If it's community property with right of survivorship, it automatically goes to the surviving spouse or surviving domestic partner. However, if it's just community property without the right of survivorship, it depends. It'll either go to the surviving spouse or surviving domestic partner, or if the deceased spouse or domestic partner had a will that states differently, then it might go to, or it should go to those, whoever they name in the will. So that's the difference, is this community property with right of survivorship automatically to your spouse. Community property, if they have a will, it could go to somebody else.
That's a really good point then. So if you're holding your property with right of survivorship, but you write a will stating something differently, then the property would be still going to the right of survivorship, correct?
Correct. As long as it's community property right of survivorship, by definition on title, if you pass away, your surviving spouse or surviving domestic partner would take title to that property.
Really good for those people who get divorced while owning property and may change their mind and write a will later or so forth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely.
Okay, so talked about community property. What about community property versus joint tenancy? What's joint tenancy?
So good questions on that. Joint tenancy is very similar to the community property with right of survivorship from a right of survivorship standpoint. Meaning, again, this is one of the questions we get often, you know, I would just want to make sure that my spouse gets the property should I die, or that the person I'm on title with gets the property should I die. And so they both have that right of survivorship aspect, which is great. Because if you don't have that right of survivorship aspect, and one of the other ways we'll talk about here in a little bit is tenants in common, and you're on title together with one or two or three people, you could have to go through the probate process in order to obtain title on that property. And the probate process is basically going through the court system to determine who the rightful owner is to your share of the property, whether it's 50% or 100% or 20% or whatever percentage that might be. You have to go through the courts and they determine who that is. And that can be a long and expensive process. So the right of survivorship is one of the questions, like I said, we get the most often is, well, what is that? You know, what types of ways of holding title have the right of survivorship? And how can I make sure that should something happen to me, it goes to my spouse or family member or whoever you'd like it to be? And so the right of survivorship is a key aspect. And so kind of go back to your question, community property, right of survivorship, and joint tenancy, they both have that right of survivorship aspect. Now, the difference with community property and joint tenants, number one, community property with right of survivorship is just, again, limited to married couples or registered domestic partners, whereas joint tenants, it can be anybody. It can be you and your sibling, you and your parents, you and your business partner, and it can be any number of people as well. So it could be just the two of you, or it could be 3 or 4 or 5. There could be multiple people involved on it. And again, there's that right of survivorship for whomever it might be on there. You've got that equal ownership interest, and you've got that right of survivorship.
I've seen that a lot with multi-generational housing that I believe, you know, I've seen personally in my own spheres kind of ticking up, or having parents helping their children buy.
Sure.
But especially the family housing, multi-generational housing with ADUs and so forth. I have clients in particular right now who is a daughter looking to buy her first property, and her parents are going to live in one house and pitch in with some of the costs, and she is going to live in the ADU and on some of the costs. And so joint tenancy would probably be their best option, because then we can have all 3, mom, dad, daughter, on title, and then she could be the surviving, or whoever could be the surviving.
Yeah, that's
right.
absolutely.
They need to check it out, but that would be a good option for them, right?
Yeah, no, that's a very common thing that we'll see, where children are, you know, especially nowadays, getting help from their parents to purchase a property, and they're going to all be on title together. The beauty of that is, like you said, joint tenancy, they would all still be on that title together, and should something happen, it would automatically go to the surviving joint tenant or joint tenants. An option with something like this as well, and I mentioned earlier, is holding title kind of separately. You can hold your portions separately as well. And so what that would mean is you can have the mother and father hold 50% interest, and they can hold their portion in a trust. And then the daughter and her husband can hold their 50% interest and hold their portion, community property right of survivorship, or in a trust as well. So they would be kind of tenants in common within their 50% interest, or whatever percentage of interest they have. But then within that percentage interest, they can still hold title as well. So that's kind of taken a little next step further, but there are lots of options. Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about joint tenancy. Let's talk about tenants in common. So what is tenants in common?
So tenants in common, you don't have that right of survivorship, number one, and it's more common with commercial properties and again, people that
perhaps business ventures.
Exactly. Business partners, business ventures, people that are going to kind of go into a property together that don't necessarily want that should something happen to them or their portion to go to this other business partner. They'd want it to go to their spouse, their family, their heirs instead. And so with tenants in common, it can be any number of people on title together. They can have any percentage of ownership they like, and your percentage is your own ownership interest. It doesn't have anything to do with or wouldn't go to any of the other co-owners with you should something happen. So again, very popular with any sort of a commercial property, investment property where, like you said, business venture, people going in together on a property as investors. You mentioned multi-generation. You'll see this very often with people that have had a property in their family for many, many years. And it started with their great, great, great grandparents. And now it's gone down many levels of ownership. And so together, all these, 20, 30, 40 different owners on a property are all tenants in common together, but each of their ownership interest within that, 1/20th, that 1/15th, whatever percentage they might have, they can hold title to their portion, however they'd like to hold it. So, but tenants in common, very, very common. Like I said, if you do hold title together, tenants in common, let's just use for argument's sake, just two people, business partners. If something were to happen to one of those two tenants in common, they pass away, it doesn't automatically go to that surviving co-business partner. That portion of the person that passed away would have to go through that probate process to determine who owns their interest. So there is no right of survivorship. It does not automatically go to the person who's still surviving.
Got it. So like in our example with the parent and children holding in the joint tenancy, the remaining spouse and child or the child could inherit the remainder of the property. Whereas in tenants in common, say the child or the spouse dies, like one of the parents dies, their portion could potentially go to a cousin, a brother, an uncle, somebody else, because it's not just automatically given to the remaining people.
Exactly. And not only could it go to somebody else, but they'd have to go through that extensive probate process, which could take time, cost money, etc. So this is, again, we mentioned at the top of this, it's important to take a look at how you hold title, not only when you buy the property, but down the road as well. Any property you're holding, things change. So people get married, they get divorced, they have kids. And so it's absolutely something that, I would recommend, and you exactly want to make sure you're aware of, because I can't tell you how often I see where people think they are entitled to a property, and they think they're entitled to a property because my parents told me, or my friend told me should something happen, and something does happen, and then they never change the title, and it's still in just the mom's name alone, or the father's name alone, or their girlfriend or boyfriend's name alone, and now they're going through probate. Which again can cost quite a bit of money and take some bit of time. So
am I missing any other ways? I know these are kind of the four, well, I guess the five main, right? You've got sole, you've got two different versions of the
community property. Exactly. Community property right of survivorship. We've got the joint tenancy and the tenants in common. And so those are probably the most common. The one that I'd say that, now is also, just as common, if not more, is a trust. And so that is kind of an all-inclusive, way of stipulating what would happen should something happen to you. And so you'll hear the phrase estate planning often. Creating a trust is part of estate planning. It's a great idea to, depending on your situation, talk to a trust attorney, talk to an estate planning attorney to maybe create that trust, because the great thing with the trust is, number one, you avoid having to go to probate if something happened to you. And you can stipulate kind of contingencies should something happen to the next person in line or the person after that. And you stipulate where you'd like, the proceeds of your property to go and the beneficiaries, and you can create all different types of terms on any property you own. And so it's very, very popular. definitely something that I would recommend any family should at least take a look at and consider,
Yeah.
and then do what's right for your situation.
Somebody's going to trust who definitely has it very clearly defined on what's happening with the property. So there's no real questions about the chain of ownership.
You're exactly right. And that's a great way of kind of summarizing and putting it into a clear, easy way to understand. A trust stipulates exactly what happens should something happen to you. And it doesn't just mean if something happens to you where you pass away, you could be, in a medical situation where, you're in a coma or you have dementia or something along those lines, and you're not capable of handling financial or real estate transactions or real estate deals anymore in the future. What happens then? Am I still going to be in the house? Are they supposed to sell the house? Who can sign on my behalf? So a trust kind of can spell all that stuff out and take away any guesswork and any potential battles between family members or friends or legal battles, etc.
Great, great. Are there any last parting words that you think anybody really needs to know when they're choosing how to hold their title?
I'd say just in summary, when you're purchasing a property, make sure you do give it some thought. If you have questions about your situation, talk to your CPA or tax expert, talk to an attorney, see what they recommend. And as we mentioned here a couple times throughout, make sure that you stay on top of that in the future in terms of how you hold title. You don't ever need to change it, but it's something that you absolutely can, and you can change as many times as you'd like. And if things happen in your life where you, again, get married, get divorced, have kids, whatever it might be, you might want to make changes to that. And that's definitely something to consider.
Great. Thank you so much. I am going to include your contact information below in case people have any questions or want to reach out to you about getting their title policies. And if you guys, if you ever need anything, feel free to call, text, email, even send me good old-fashioned email. We're always happy to help. Feel free to check on ChelseaRobinson for any further questions on the blog, or tips, tricks, and trends in San Fernando Valley and Los Angeles. Thank you, Blake.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too. Thanks.